Hi, I'm Sherry Phillips Mitchell. Welcome to Cherry Ridge Farms in my farmhouse kitchen. I welcome you to learn a little bit about myself and the book that I've written recently. It's called My Farmhouse Journal, Memories and Recipes. And I wrote this book about 3 years ago, actually. I got started on it because my sister was very ill with cancer, and I wanted to get our childhood stories down. The stories that we remembered growing up on the farm, romping around, and those stories that also we learned in the kitchen. And so we've gotten together today so that I can cook one of those heirloom recipes that happens to be my oatmeal cookie recipe. Now, back in the farmhouse in 1962 in Highland County, when I moved to the farm and became a little farm girl, there was a sample fair called the Farmers Institute in the school at Beaufort, Ohio. And Mom had already started grooming us in the kitchen. We learned how to blend and to whip and to fold, and how to knead bread and how to cut out cookies, use a rolling pin. And I started learning how to work my way around in the kitchen. One of the recipes that's endearing to me is my oatmeal cookie recipe. So this recipe, when I saw that they had a contest, I was only about 9 years old, and I told my mom I want to make my cookie recipe. Now, my mother at the time could have discouraged me. She could have said, "Sherry, you're just 9 and there'll be other people. You don't have a chance." But she didn't. She got all the recipes together for me. I mean, not the recipes, the ingredients together for me. I already knew how to read. I had the recipe. I knew how to bake. I knew how to set the timer. And I made the cookies all by myself. Mother helped me get the cookies to the judging the night before the event. And at the event, I was engulfed in a cakewalk and all the festivities going on. And over the loudspeaker, they called out, "The winner of the best cookie recipe is Sherry Phillips." I was just awestruck, and my sister had to say, "Go get your prize." So I got a $2 bill and a blue ribbon, a small blue ribbon, and that was the beginning of my cooking. And I have this in my book. I believe it's on page 15, along with lots of other recipes. And I am working with another cook, did a segment with her on cooking, so I kind of think this will be something I'll be doing more and more of, because as my little thing says, home is in the kitchen, right? All right, so we are going to make today for you, and you'll get to try these when we're all done, is my famous oatmeal cookie recipe. And I'll get all my ingredients together here, and you come right back and we'll put this together. I have learned this is a great way to do things, because what most people think of is, oh my gosh, look, all of the ingredients I have to get out first and foremost, right? And then I have time. If you can create a baking station in your house, or a cupboard where you keep things like all of your measuring cups, your spatulas, your measuring spoons, all the things like the shortening, the salt, the baking soda. If you can keep them in an area, then it's not so hard. But if you have to go to this cabinet and that cabinet down here, that just becomes too much work. It really does. So if you can kind of create a baking station or a cooking station if you're doing cooking on the stove, which we'll do at another time. We'll actually create that. One of the things Mother taught us, and any recipe that you have, let's make sure that's there, is if you have a shortening or a butter and a sugar, you're always going to cream those together. So the first thing that we're going to put in there is 3/4 cups of shortening. Give you a little tip. If you wet the measuring cup, the shortening won't stick so bad and it's easy to get out. Now, here's another great thing. I was about 9, and in school, you're going to start doing fractions, right? And everybody hates fractions because they just can't figure it out. But if you're in the kitchen, you can figure out fractions pretty easily. Well, how was that? Well, because we have half cup, third of a cup, fourth of a cup, and a cup. And it's just a simple little mathematics problem in the kitchen to figure out how many of these fourth of a cups go into 1 cup to make a cup. And does everybody know that by now? I think they do. It's 4, right? And later you learn 4 over 4, and that's pretty easy. So I said all that to say this, is that my granddaughter, who's 10, is learning her fractions when she cooks with her mama. All right, so on the side, inside of here, it tells us where our measurements are. So we have 3/4 of a cup. And we're just going to put that right into our mixer. Now I've recently gotten rid of my old stand-up mixer, and I got a new fancy dancy one here. And that's that KitchenAid. And gosh, I love it. It's like having a new car. It's just so pretty, and I just love all these different beaters that I have for it. So that's great. Oven is ready. We turned that on first. Always remember that, because it's such a aggravation when you turn around to go to put it in and you forgot to turn the oven on. All right, so shortening went in. Let's do, if you're following along, and you'll be able to see the recipe at some point, we need 1/2 cup. Here we go. How many half cups go into 1 cup? Let's look at that. So we would actually, with my little granddaughters, do it. 2, right? 2 over 2, right? It's very helpful. So that was 1/2 cup that went in there. Then we need a whole cup of our brown sugar. Now, I often think when I'm doing any kind of cooking, who trumped this stuff up? I mean, who came up with white sugar needs to go in and brown sugar, and why is brown sugar? I don't know. Maybe my granddaughters and I will figure that out. I'm just going to stick that there because I know I'm going to make a mess. And with brown sugar, key word is always packed. Okay? Packed down, because there's a lot of air in there. Okay? So we have 1 of those. We'll just start that mixer right up before I get too much sugar in there. All right, you ready? Whoops, somewhere over there. And the sugar and the shortening are creaming, right? So anytime you see that on a recipe, you'll put that. Because you know, back in the day, probably before my mother's time, my mother was kind of that way too. You would just say, here's the ingredients, and everybody knew, well, you always creamed this, and you did that, and you put the dry ingredients in later. What do you think comes after we cream the shortening and the sugar? There's another key ingredient that we always follow next. Okay, so we'll go ahead and lock that down, cream that a little bit more. After you cream sugar and shortening, whether it's butter or it's Crisco, eggs usually follow, and that even makes it creamier, right? So for this recipe, we have 1 egg. Turn that off. Oops, that was a little high speed there, wasn't it? Okay. We'll just scrape down our sides so that it's blended better. Okay, we're going to stick that right back on just for a little bit more while I put my egg in there. I like brown eggs because I raised chickens for many years, and I just think that farm-raised chickens give you the best eggs. Okay? And now that's whipping, is creaming it even better. Okay. All right. I think that's enough time. Okay. Let's take that right off of there. Whoops. Okay. See how it's all creamed up and mixed up. you know, so we got egg and all of that, and we got shortening with all of the sugar. It's real important. Okay, so let me just set that over here in the kitchen. All right, so we've got that done. Now we're ready to start looking at our dry ingredients. Okay, so we're going to grab another bowl. And we're going to do flour. I need that flour. Oops, excuse me. And we're going to have 3 cups of flour. Okay, I do not sift flour back in the day, way back. Okay, people used to actually take their wheat to the mill and have it ground. And if you know anything about that, the wheat seed is in a hard little shell. And as much as they tried to get flour that looked like this, without the little shavings, chaff they called it, that would be in there. Plus, sometimes there might be bugs or something. So you sifted flour to work through all that to make sure that you didn't have that in your nice pie crust, little chunks of stuff. All right, so we're going to assemble our dry ingredients that will go into our wet ingredients. And we're going to do 1 cup of flour, 1 teaspoon of salt. Now, my home ec teacher, Betty Ellis, God rest her soul, Betty Cantor from Western Brown, I never forget this. She taught us, never measure over your bowl. Do you know why? Because what if you're starting to measure and you go like this and a whole bunch goes in there and now you can't get it out and you ruin the whole thing, right? So she taught us to measure over something else, whoops, and then put it in. Okay, so we got our salt. We need a 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda, okay, which isn't a lot, but that's just going to be enough to raise the cookies up. Okay, and then we will just take our spatula there. We'll just kind of stir that around to mix that together. Okay. And then we're going to, over here, one of the ingredients, I don't know how this makes a big difference, but 1 teaspoon of vanilla is going to go in there. I should have done that when I had it on the mixer stand, but I didn't. But that's okay. That's all right. Probably if I didn't put that in there, it wouldn't be that big of a deal. You probably wouldn't go, this doesn't have vanilla in it. Right? Okay. All right, so we got that all mixed up. All right, so now we are going to blend the two, right? So all we're going to do is just dump that nicely in there. Whoops. Okay. And we'll stir that all up. Now, you could wash your hands off and you could go ahead and mix this up. I don't know if you can get a view of that. We could have put it right back into our bowl and done it with our, well, let's do that. Let's do it. All right. All right, so we'll lock her down. We'll go ahead and mix this up. Yeah, see how much faster that is? That's why you got to get one of these KitchenAids, right? And they can handle heavy-duty stuff. Okay. All right. Now we've got to do, here's where the 3 cups comes in. Now Quaker Oats makes 2 different kinds of oats on the market shelf. One is old-fashioned, and that really is a bigger piece of oat. The other is chopped up real fine. I like this for the texture. I like it. And that was what I learned this recipe from, which was the old-fashioned Quaker Oats box. So we're going to go ahead and 1, how about, are anybody taking Spanish? Uno, dos? Who knows the next one? Tres? Yeah. So I took Spanish in high school, and the only thing I remember is how to count. Okay, so there we go. We got 3 of those. Now the other thing I like about this recipe is I really feel like this is wholesome. Okay, I got an egg in there and I got oatmeal in there. Okay. So it's good for, get your bowl locked down. That's better, much better. Now this is really hard to do with a spoon in the bowl. I almost really like to do like I do my meatloaf. Wash my hands and use my hands, okay? And we're gonna put just a little bit of water in there. Recipe calls for, you can add 1/4 of a cup of water if this looks really dry, and it does. Now, here's another wholesome ingredient, right? Which is nuts, right? All right, so we're going to put in 1/2 cup of nuts. Chopped nuts. I just use my rolling pin and I just knock it silly. I don't make them real small. I like them big and chunky. If I'm going to get a piece of nut, I want a big chunky nut. I don't want a little piece I can hardly tell is in there, okay? And then we're going to do some seedless grapes. How wholesome is this, huh? Yeah, so you don't have to feel bad about eating a cookie if it's my old-fashioned oatmeal cookies. I'm going to throw that in there. Does everybody here like butterscotch? Okay, so today, if I can find out where I put my butterscotch, let's add a few butterscotch. 1, 2? Does that sound fun?
Yep.
All right, let's put a few butterscotch in there. All right, so since we did 1/2 cup, 1/2 cup, how about let's do 1/2 cup? Sound good? All right. And that's just for flavor. All right, mixing it up good. Okay, I think that's good enough. All right. Now, I could never have stirred that up with a regular mixer. Not even my stand mixer that I have, my old one, because it didn't have this particular attachment. So, they're probably going to call me KitchenAid to do a commercial for them. And I would. All right, so I'm going to clean this mess up, and give me just a minute, and then we'll show you the next step. All right, so we've got all of our ingredients all mixed up. Doesn't that look yummy? And this is the time that you want to try it. And I do sometimes. As a little girl doing this, the recipe says right on it, to do it, drop it by the rounded teaspoonful on a greased cookie sheet. So we need to take our shortening, and I always keep a little paper towel that I grease my pan with. Okay. So we don't want a bunch. We're not frying our oatmeal cookies on here, okay? So lightly. Some people use the spray, but back in 1967, when I started with this recipe, there was no such thing as spray, okay? And it was Crisco shortening. All right, so my mother, I remember very distinctly, we would get a spoonful, and we used the measuring spoon, and we took another spoon, and we dumped it off like that, okay? So we're going to do one of these the way Mother said. But then we're going to come back, and we're going to do the Sherry Mitchell, which is probably going to be using this big spoon, okay? So we're going to go ahead and do 3, 6, 9, 12 fit on a baking pan, okay? There was that butterscotch, yummy, yummy. Okay, so remember that, 12 will fit on. We'll get those off on there real quick. Big important step right now. If you didn't remember, you got to look back around and say, did I turn the oven on? It's preheated. That's always good, because it's no fun when you are ready to get these done. Okay. Oh, I got a little flour on me there. All right. And of course you can see I'm not keeping that very uniform, am I? And that's kind of important, you know, because some of them are bigger than the others. Some are smaller. And why do you think that's important? Well, because some will cook quicker than others, and some will still not be quite done, and some will be toasty, done, and crispy. All right, as you can see, this one's a little different than this one, right? Okay, and then when you're at home, it's not a big deal. All right, so we're ready to go to the oven with this, okay? So we're going to put this in the oven according to our nice little card. This goes in for 12 to 15 minutes. And I always set it for 12 and look, because I don't like for them to get really crusty. I like them still to be soft. Okay, here we go. Okay. One of the questions that was asked to me was my connection with Laura Ingalls Wilder. So as this little farm girl in the 4th grade, at this point we had moved to a new farm. Daddy had sold the 100-acre farm and we moved to another 100-acre farm, but we had a great big ginormous house. I started 4th grade at Greenbush Elementary. That was the first year that we got to go to the library. And as a 9-year-old, I went down into the basement and around the corner into the library, which was only about the size of a large room. Okay, it wasn't like a library you think of today. Lots of good books, and I remember so vividly walking in the entry door here, and right over to my left was the series of Laura Ingalls Wilder books. I had never heard of her before. I didn't know who she was, but I was intrigued, probably more so by the book cover. I was old enough to read the back of the book cover, and I wanted to read it. So I started with Big House in the Little Woods. And while I was reading it, I was like, wow, someday I want to write my stories just like Laura Ingalls Wilder. Someday has come. These stories in here are of me and my sister Debbie on the farm, romping around on those 2 farms that I mentioned. Not exactly like the way that Laura wrote them, but nevertheless my stories. I've been to her house, the Laura Ingalls Wilder Museum, in her homestead, which is in Mansfield, Missouri. So if you're a big Laura Ingalls Wilder fan, you might want to make a trip over there. It's a wonderful history. Many, many things they've added. I went one year when my kids were little, and then I went a year when they were all grown, and they've added so many more things. But I could go there and just spend days, but my husband and my kids said no. So anyway, so that's how I came to know Laura Ingalls Wilder and how she inspired me at the age of 9. I run a horse farm, Cherry Ridge Farms. We have a horse farm that does therapeutic horsemanship. We do riding, and we do lessons, and we board horses. We have now turned our farm basically into a therapeutic horsemanship program, and we cater to people with disabilities, and that can be autism, that can be physical, mental disabilities, any type of disability. We do field trips for them in particular because they want to be included. They want to do what everybody else is doing. So we have catered to the disabilities of those type students. And on Tuesday nights we do our therapeutic horsemanship program, which is great for, especially for people, and it doesn't have to be children. We don't turn anybody away. But if they have difficulty walking, they cannot build their core muscles because they can't move around. But being on top of the horseback is the same. It mimics the gait of the human gait, and we then can help them to strengthen their core muscles. And we have a rider. His name is David. He's been coming now, I think this will be his 3rd year. He rides the little girl, and he absolutely loves her. In the beginning, he could not hardly walk on his own. Okay, he had to be helped. I happened to substitute when they were wrapping up in October, and this little guy walked out of the barn down to the arena, got on his horse, all because he was able to start strengthening that core muscle that he couldn't have done otherwise. It was just a fantastic moment because I knew this guy from the beginning and saw. And if you saw him, David, show us your muscles. And he throws his little muscles up. We also do a little horse show for him in the end of July. We do a therapeutic horsemanship show, and it benefits the farm. And we take those students who are in that program and we actually bring them to a horse show. And they are all gussied up and looking good and out in the big arena like everybody else. It's quite an enduring time. I would say that I have a love, a passion for teaching children. That's probably, you know, grandmas do things with their grandchildren, but I love to teach, just like I'm teaching you mathematics here with fractions, and I like to help them and empower them with knowledge, and I feel like I have always been that way. I do like old things, so if you go around my house, you're going to see some old antiques, but I do like things that have lasted through the times, you know, hard times, good times, bad times, rough times. Furniture has made it, glassware, I mean, you know, think about glassware. If it's lasted 200 years and didn't get dropped on the floor or banged up, that's pretty cool. It's a great remembrance that we can survive difficult things in our lives. So. It wasn't. But actually, my daughter nominated me, and we'll get her up here because she just happened to drop in, and that'll be great. And she can tell why she nominated me and how I actually won that award. It was just totally by surprise that it happened. So hold that thought.
I am Christy Mitchell Brown, and I nominated Sherry Mitchell for Country Woman of the Year in 2017. I nominated her for Country Woman of the Year because she is the embodiment of the country spirit. So everything that she believes, I always like to say she was kind of the what you see today with the pro-life before it was cool. So she was always doing things, you know, from scratch, growing gardens. She was always interested in composting and always interested in, you know, maybe using honey for certain things locally and all these things that now mothers are thinking are cool, right? Cloth diapers, breastfeeding, all those things.
Because she didn't think it was so cool. Gardening? I am never going to have a garden, she told me one day in the garden.
So Mom's always kind of had this like country, I would say kind of country hippie spirit, right? Of trying to do things naturally.
Peace, love, and joy.
Yes. Chickens, animals, and things like that. So it's been really cool to watch her go from where she was 20 years ago to where she is today, following her passion with writing, turning the farm into a purpose for passion, you know, being able to hear her stories about how they're helping kids who otherwise maybe wouldn't have an outlet to be able to do things that we do too, and just watching her joy with that. And then of course the encouragement that she does with her writing. It's just been so cool when we're out and somebody says, hey, I love reading your article in the paper. You know, it's the first thing I go to. It's just been really cool. And so she just is always taking, you know, the most simple moment and really turning it into a moment of joy. So that was why I nominated her as Country Woman of the Year.
All right, let me check those cookies. First pan full of Sherry's famous oatmeal cookies, thanks to Quaker Oats, right, for making that recipe. They're nice and golden brown, but they're not crispy around the edges. Now, we had almost a minute still left, and remember what I told you? I set it for 12 instead of 15 because ovens vary. People vary. Everything in life varies a little bit. So I would have been taking them out now, and so they'd have been a lot crunchier. Okay. Now also with this particular recipe, this is not a chewy cookie recipe a day or two later. It will be now because it's warm. This was made back in the day when I was a little girl growing up. What did we do with cookies? We dunked them in milk, and the adults dunked them in coffee. So if you had a cookie that was very soft and you dunked it into the milk, what do you think happened? Down into the bottom, and there you were fishing out your chunks of cookie, and that was not good, right? So this is more of a stable cookie recipe for that very reason. So it's not a real chewy, but it has no preservatives in it. No preservatives at all. So you want to keep that in an airtight container after they come off of the cookie sheet. So let me grab a spatula. Ta-da! So we're going to put them on our plate here. I like Victorian stuff. That's a passion. Victorian anything is a passion for me. I just love it. I love it. So we just take those right off. Some people put them right onto a cooling rack. I don't own a cooling rack because I'm going to eat these like right here in a minute. You're going to sit down with me and we are going to eat these. Hope I got enough milk for all of you. I can smell that butterscotch. That's a new one. That's my modern version of my old-fashioned oatmeal recipe. Okay, so there we are. And let's eat. Oh, well, thanks for coming to the farmhouse. We appreciate all that you do for us. And if you have time, the book is available on Amazon and all of the major bookseller sites. Or you can contact me, jerryphillipsmitchell.com. And there's a place there that you can contact me and we'll meet up if you'd like to get a copy directly from me, a signed copy.